In case you don't know, you're at Lador Vador. Our congregation doesn't fit into any of the categories that you've heard before. It's not Reform or Conservative or Orthodox. It's not Humanist or Reconstructionist. I call it Cosmic Judaism. We unite Judaism and science. We merge Judaism and science, and we also do a lot of civil rights, do a lot of social action. And we have rock and Shabbat music. And so we love tradition, but we just interpret it differently. And we believe that there is no supernatural, but the natural is super. At least that's how I believe. That's what comes out of here. Everybody who comes is welcome to believe anything they want, but that's pretty much what you'll get from me, a rational, scientific approach to Judaism. We also believe that it's good to do something that's almost never done at any synagogues that I know of or churches. We bring people in who disagree with me and disagree with a lot of things that we say here because we like to have different opinions expressed. It was done in the Talmud, and then the Orthodox, I think, stopped doing that after that. And now we can't get them in here, but we're trying. So if you know any Orthodox rabbis who will actually engage in discussion, bring them over. But we do that. We have trouble getting them here, but we do have Buddhists and Muslims and atheists and Hindus and Christians and a whole bunch of other people. And tonight we have a very special guest. It's really my pleasure to have someone here who is extremely dedicated, extremely knowledgeable, and very articulate in 2 languages. I think we'll go with English this time, right? Yes. Okay, we'll go with English. This is Eileen Josephs. She's an immigration attorney. She was the Consul of Guatemala. You still doing that?
I was the honorary Consul of Guatemala for 10 years, because now we have a real.
Now they have a real one. She was doing that, and then she's been given numerous awards, done a lot of pro bono work, done a lot of cutting edge work trying to protect children and immigrants. And like me, Eileen has noticed, and some of you probably have too, hanging out in liberal circles, hanging out in democratic circles, she's experienced anti-Semitism coming from the left. And that's what we're here to talk about today. So she and I will address that issue. We'll talk about it a bit. And then after we're done, if anybody's still awake, we will ask you if you'd like to share some of your stories or some of your experiences, some of your thoughts on it. And then we'll also entertain questions, and then we'll wrap up. So I'm going to turn it over now to Eileen to share some thoughts with us.
Thank you, Rabbi Silver. I know Rabbi Silver for many years because, as you know, he's also a civil rights attorney, and we have, in the past, fought many battles because, you know, the plight of the undocumented and the maltreatment of the undocumented started many years ago. The worst deportations ever in U.S. history took place actually the first 4 years of the Obama administration.
Really?
When nobody cared to speak about it or write about it. I actually wrote a policy paper that I brought up one here and that I could share with all of you that has been printed by the Palm Beach Center for Democracy and Policy Research, where I sit on the board, where I have documented everything I say with the work I have been doing here with others, protecting the sojourners while Democrats pretended they didn't see anything. So yes, this battle has been one of many years, and I actually, a little bit of my background. I grew up in Mexico City. I grew up Eileen Walborski. My father, of blessed memory, Hyman Walborski, was born in the Bronx, New York. He was first generation. My paternal grandparents, Israel and Sarah, came to the United States luckily in 1923. The few that remained there didn't make it alive. And my father started working for a company that made ladies' undergarments called Exquisite Form. And that company sent him first to Alabama, then Cuba, then Venezuela, where he met and married my mother, and they moved in 1962 to Mexico. So I grew up speaking Spanish to a father that grew up speaking Yiddish. I grew up with a father that, you know, because of his life and what I saw, the concept of borders, the movements of people, and intergroup work has always been very important to me. I was lucky enough to go to Brandeis University as since I'm a United States citizen born abroad. And there I was very lucky that it just that happened. I majored in sociology, Latin American studies, and legal studies. All my friends, of course, Brandeis, were on pre-med track. I didn't know what I was gonna do. But luckily, my sophomore year, I started working for Greater Boston Legal Services as an intern, and that's when I started helping Salvadoran refugees that back then also were applying for asylum, but many of them couldn't get asylum because what we're hearing in the news now is very common. It's just that Congress hasn't really changed its laws to capture and bring in legal ways people that escape generalized conditions of civil strife. Asylum really does not work for many people. So given what I saw, I was lucky to write my thesis under this Professor Fuchs, who was an eminence in the immigration field. He actually was the creator of the Peace Corps. So actually, in Brandeis, my desire to become an immigration lawyer was solidified. I went to law school, then I worked for the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. I met my husband. We moved here. I worked for Florida Rural Legal Services. So what I'm talking to you about is a passion, but yes, what people don't know is that in 1996, Congress, in a bipartisan fashion, signed by President Clinton, created a law that has made it very difficult for people that cross borders to self-correct their legal status. For example, if a person crosses a border, before 1996, if they were able to get an employer to sponsor them, you could do that. But the 1996 bipartisan law signed by a Democratic president has created the illegality of millions. Many of the, for example, Guatemalan Mayans that work here in our landscapers and all, it's very difficult for them to become legal because of this law created in 96, whereas if you're in the country illegally for 1 year, even if you have a way to obtain your legal status through a spouse, there's bars. You're barred from obtaining that for 10 years. It's a very cumbersome process. So that really prompted me to become an activist. I never really thought I was going to be an activist. That's how I met Rabbi Silver. I organized one of the biggest rallies in 2006 where the Palm Beach Post rarely covered because Rabbi Silver knows. I would call the media, nobody was interested. I think we moved like 3,000 people there. But the Palm Beach Post rarely covered it. And I showed up there with my speech because I'm not a public speaker, I'm not an activist. And I remember vividly that I started to thank Senator McCain and all these Republican senators and representatives that were proactive for immigration reform. And people were saying, who's that nut up there thanking Republicans? But that was me. Why? Because when I was at Brandeis University, that I had Professor Lawrence Fuchs as my mentor. He was very involved in writing the 1986 law, and he always told me that immigration law and policy has to be bipartisan, that we always have to work in compromise, that we always have to, in policy, think that way. So that's why I've had a lot of issues with activists, because my mind is more policy, and that's why I brought my paper here to share with all of you, but I urge you please to send me emails, and I will share. I took the time to write about my 25 years here and how I've been fighting for the immigrants. So basically that's how it started. I met Rabbi Silver, I've organized rallies, I never thought I would be an activist. I organized a coalition because I knew that, we needed to fix the law, and of course, you move to, so I remember I don't know if you were in the beginning, we created the Palm Beach Rights Immigrants Coalition. I was one of the founders. And that's where the painful experiences started for me. In 2009, President Obama, who was elected, I voted for him because he promised us immigration reform in his first year. He forgot that promise. And not only did he forget that promise, he expanded Secure Communities, a program created by Bush in his last year, exponentially, spending millions and millions of dollars in enforcement. And so here in Palm Beach County, we had law enforcement working with ICE chasing Guatemalans, tearing up families. In the last administration, 3 million people were deported, largely from Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, the Northern Triangle. We've had 400,000 United States citizen children lose a parent to deportation, separation of families, but nobody knew about it. So I filed complaints with the Department of Homeland Security. So everything you will read in my policy paper is policy, but I prove it. I prove it because I did take the time to do human rights work when nobody cared. When the Democrats would like not want me, I would say, you know, President Obama promised us this, what's going on? They would overlook me, they would not talk to me. So I was busy filing complaints because, as Rabbi Silver knows, the last thing we have as human rights activists is to document. So I decided I was going to document. I filed complaints. I got the Department of Homeland Security, Office of Civil Rights and Liberties 3 times to come down here. A lot of positive change was done with our law enforcement. But here I was working really hard, doing all of this, and guess what? The coalition that I created with Barry, all of a sudden, in 2010, decided to do an event at the Night Heron Activist Center promoting BDS. And I remember calling them and saying, it's people that I knew, like Barry knows, it's very painful because it's people that you know. I said, you know, what are you guys doing? What are you guys doing? Back then, people didn't even know what BDS was, even people in the Jewish community. BDS is something I found out that way, but I would tell people, and I remember, and they said, oh, Eileen, don't worry. What happened is, and what I have seen is, what has happened is that paid immigration activists have used the immigrants' rights movement for community organizing, just to get out the vote, but with no intent of passing legislation. And in that movement, I have seen it. That's why I have nothing to do with paid activists. I have nothing to do with paid activists for SEIU and all that. I don't believe in paid activism. So in that movement, these paid activists from Florida Immigrant Coalition invited a group to join that penetrated the coalition that I created called Answer Coalition. I have like the links and all that. Answer Coalition promotes BDS, and if you look really deep down, they really just want the destruction of the state of Israel. I remember calling a friend of ours that was the head of the Jewish Federation intergroup. You may know him, Dr. Luis Fleischman. And I remember saying, Luis, I know him. He's an Uruguayan Jewish person that I know. I said, Luis, this is going on in my coalition. And he's like, Eileen, that group is very dangerous. That group was labeled by the Southern Poverty Center as a hate group. I said, what do I do? I mean, I basically called people in our coalition. I said, don't do the event. You cannot do this event. We're an immigrants' rights coalition. And they said, oh, Eileen, don't worry. Nothing will happen. So I brought my poor husband, who's a dentist, and I showed up there. They were all nervous, and I saw what happened. And they were very upset because I told them that I was going to leave the coalition. Many of them told me, oh, don't leave. Let's keep it to ourselves. I said, no, I'm leaving. And I called Barry, and I said, no. They told me, are you going to stop advocating for the immigrants? I said, no. I'm not going to stop advocating for the immigrants. I'm just not going to advocate with you. I'm going to advocate with people that care for my people. I'm going to advocate for people that care for the one and only Jewish state in the world. I'm going to advocate with people that care for my civil rights issue. But it was very painful. But luckily, I had Rabbi Silver as a friend that stood with me. I had Luis Fleischman from the Federation, and we had a couple of people that left that coalition, some evangelicals, some Latinos that saw the pain that they were causing to me. And they were shocked because you know what I did? Since I'm a human rights activist, I documented. So I called the media on them. They didn't like that because they didn't like it. So I documented. I got El Sentinel, a Spanish language newspaper that used to exist there, to talk about what happened so nobody can ever deny what happened. And we got an article that expressed what happened. that they did an event, the coalition that I created did an event promoting BDS, the destruction of the state of Israel, and that I have decided not to advocate with them, but that I was going to create another coalition. And I did. I did with Barry. Actually, he gave us the idea for the name of it, Florida Voices for Immigration Reform, when we were having bagels with my friend who's a pastor. And we created a coalition with no paid activists, because this is what I tell young people. Activism is not paid. You cannot be a paid activist because then you get co-opted. You get co-opted by whoever's paying you. So I said, all of us are, and I said to them too, we have to create a coalition that is more to the center, a coalition that is going to act as a bridge between both parties so that finally Congress gives us sensible immigration reform. Because honestly, at the end of the day, to bring the 11 million out of the shadows, we need Congress to act. And then that's how we came up with Florida Voices for Immigration Reform. We invited the sheriff of Palm Beach County, Luis Fleischman from the Jewish Federation cooperated. We got people that were Republicans and Democrats. And believe me, when I met with Representative Frankel or Representative Deutsch, and I would look at them and I said, I'm a co-chair of a coalition that is acting as a bridge between both parties, they couldn't believe it. They're like, here. I actually also had a young man that regretfully died of a sudden. He was an undocumented Republican. So that was the message I wanted to share. I wanted to say, we are here and we need you to act, but we need you to find compromise. And I've been in that battle largely alone because it's been very painful. Many of the people that we thought were friends were very hurtful in how I saw how they didn't care for what is our civil rights movement or for our people. I even remember there's, the anarchists from Lake Worth. I've been a real activist. I've worked even with the anarchists of Lake Worth to realize you can't work with them. But there was a young Jewish guy who's an anarchist. I'm not mentioning his name. It was very painful because I did care for him. But my last conversation to him was, X. When you fight for human rights, you have to fight for human rights of all people, including our people. And he hung up on me. I remember calling Commissioner Golden, who just passed, a blessed memory. And I remember calling her, and she was far to the left too. And I called her and I said, I just want to tell you that this group is doing events in your city promoting the BDS movement. And she said to me, well, Eileen, they have freedom of speech. And I said, well, you know what? I have freedom of speech too. And I'm telling you that in your city, there's people promoting hate against our people. Okay? That's how bad it was. But we were really kind of alone. It got so bad that this group Answer that penetrated our coalition was giving classes at Palm Beach State College on colonialism and brainwashing the young immigrants. And what pained me is many of them are Latinos, Guatemalan Mayans that had no clue about this, and they're brainwashed and they show up to our immigrants' rights movement with Palestinian flags. So they were teaching them anti-colonialism courses. This group Answer that I suggest you visit, I remember having to call Palm Beach State College because I said, you're promoting hate. They changed that. Then the group started giving the same classes at the Boca Raton Library. I remember calling there and telling them, blah, blah, blah is happening. This is hate speech towards, and they said, well, they have the freedom of speech. I said, again, I'm letting you know, they have the freedom of speech, I have the freedom of speech, that with our taxpayers' money, you're promoting hate against the Jewish people. So in a nutshell, like I've told you, I've experienced this hate. I have seen it. It has been very discouraging to me. The way I have acted, like I told you, is I decided not to continue to advocate with people that don't care for my people, but that doesn't stop me from fighting for what I care for the human rights of the sojourners. And in this whole process, I have just witnessed these last 10 years. This event took place in 2010. I haven't seen Barry for a long time, but I've just kind of dedicated a lot of my time now doing behind the scenes, speaking to Republicans, speaking to Democrats, creating policy papers, trying for them to, to compromise, being very pained by the Democrats that right now are in complete resist mode.
How were,
And,
how were Representative Frankel and Deutsch? Were they receptive to you when you talked to them?
Never. I've lost, Representative Deutsch has been very nice to me. And actually right now what I'm doing, more of my energy is focused on attending the root causes of the irregular migration of children from Guatemala. So I'm now a member, I'm Orthodox now. My husband and I are members of the Palm Beach Synagogue. I love it, I grew up conservative, but anyway, the shul that I'm a member of, and many members there, and many are Democrats and some are Republicans, have all given me money. We're gonna soon open in Guatemala City, Casa Shalom, which is a school that will reintegrate return migrant youth so that they get vocational training, entrepreneurship, and gainful employment in Guatemala. So I did meet with Representative Deutsch last year to try to get, USAID. He's been nice to me. I show up and I tell him, he says yes, yes. Regretfully, I have to say Representative Frankel has not been receptive. When she was mayor, she was not receptive when they were chasing Guatemalans down Broadway with the West Palm Beach police. And she knows that I talk about it and she may not like it, but right now I called her office recently and I told them that I'm very, very upset at her because she's just in a resist mode. She's just getting her immigration ideas from paid activists like SEIU. I've told her repeatedly in her office that the Palm Beach Immigrants' Rights Movement, Immigrants' Rights Coalition was penetrated by anti-Semitic forces, that I created FEIR, and it goes in one ear, out the other. So you know what? Victor Garcia de la Rosa is running as a Republican against her. He has many people running against him, so I don't know if he will survive, but he has told me that if he does make it, that I will be his consultant for immigration. So I hope this message gets to Representative Frankel, because she does not have clean hands as how she handled the immigrants while she was a mayor, because that's where I filed the complaints, because in her city is when we had ICE and the police chasing down immigrants. And she has not been receptive to all the work that I do pro bono and the work that I take to write policy papers. She only listens to SEIU or United We Dream, all that are paid activists, paid by people that are just doing this to move voters, to get them to. So she knows that I outwardly say what I'm saying. I go to her page to send this message, because you know what, she probably will win, but she should start working across the aisle, because she hasn't.
So Congressman Deutsch has been receptive to, does he vote for bills that you wanted to vote for?
Well, nothing has come up. That's the issue right now. They haven't even done anything. They're just kind of in a resist mode, because as you know, even with you, like this whole idea, I've been speaking to Republicans for a long time. I learned that, like I said, from my professor at Brandeis, who was very involved with Congress. His best friend was Simpson and Kennedy, and he always told me legislation, especially big legislation, has to be bipartisan. So I have just spent a lot of time, as you know, trying to get them, and I just hope that they get them. So going back. At the beginning, well, we're almost at the 4th year of this presidency, but it's been 4 years of wasted time for the 11 million that continue to be here undocumented because of my time of speaking with Republicans. They really want the border to be secure, and the border has not been secure. The truth is, it hasn't been secure. And President Obama, and I'm not here going to fight with you. I have it all written down. I have footnotes. I have everything to corroborate everything that I said. President Obama did spend billions in interior enforcement. So Republicans will not move on legalizing the 11 million that are here, that literally want to have a work permit so they can work without fear, drive without fear, and be able to go to their countries to bury their loved ones. But Republicans will not do that until they get the funding for the border. And as we know, you cannot tell a Democrat that, because they'll say, whoa, we don't want to give money for the wall. Well, you know what? they didn't say that with Obama, and they didn't even care about the 3 million that were being deported. So it's time for compromise, because really Democrats do not have clean hands on immigration. So yes, I actually remember getting a call from you 2 years ago. Barry called me and said if I wanted to speak about the wall, and I said yes. And I'm going to tell you how I feel about the wall. We should have the wall, so then we could have legalization for the 11 million, and we can have a separate direct path to citizenship for the Dreamers. That's where I stand, and that's the only way out of this.
I mean, you don't think do you think the wall's a good idea, or you don't think it's a good idea, but you want to do it to compromise so that they can have the wall and then they'll.
I see beyond the wall.
There is
a
wall going to
There hasn't been a wall. Obama spent billions building a wall.
Right. No, it's just that I know that when we talk about the wall, that's President Trump talking to his base, and it works. So it's really border security. We don't need a wall. The money that the administration wants is the money for, I have to tell you, we have drugs coming through the border. I work with the victims of the kids that are coming. Many of those kids are not the real children of the people bringing them in.
But do you support a wall, or you just think you don't think it's a good idea, but we should just do it to try to get some kind of compromise?
I believe that, as you do too, that each life is there's pressures. So we're dealing about 11 million human lives. So for 11 million human lives that are here living in fear,
yes,
I would give the administration whatever it wants for border security. I always tell Republicans can tell their base that it's the wall, and Democrats can call it to their base border security. I see all of you nodding. Go and nod that way when you have the phone calls that I get on a daily basis of people here being 20 years here and they can't go bury their mother.
Are the deportations still going on now that you're talking about under Obama? Are they still going on now? Is it more or less?
Actually, that's the interesting thing. In terms of interior enforcement, the deportations are much less. I have never seen something as I saw the first 3 and 4 years of the President Obama administration. It was horrific. And I documented it. And again, I don't want to spend time here, going back and forth. I've taken the time to write it. You can go see the footnotes. This is not something I'm inventing. And you can talk to any immigration lawyer working with this population. When we get phone calls by reporters ask us, some of my colleagues, they say the first thing they tell our reporters, the only difference is now you're calling. That's the only difference. And actually, in terms of interior enforcement, it was much worse during the Obama. They're much less. What is different is the border. And of course, it was what President Trump did with the separation of families, that policy that lasted luckily only 1 month, but repercussions that we're still dealing with. Yes, babies, but again,
from the parents.
I know, that was horrific, and we had Republicans and Democrats both protest, and that policy changed. That policy doesn't exist. But you know what? What about the 400,000 United States citizen children that lost a parent to deportation under the Obama administration?
Can you explain why that was the policy?
I don't know. I have asked people close to the Obama administration, and honestly, I, with all due respect, and I voted for President Obama, I just think he didn't know what he was doing. A lot of people said that he did that to please Republicans on enforcement. But, negotiate better. If you're going to give Republicans the money they want for the border, request the legalization of the 11 million here. Like, don't do interior enforcement, expand secure communities like you did, allowing police to work with ICE, and not say, hey, I'm going to give you the money for interior enforcement, but let's legalize the 11 million here. So I try to get this answer, and this is the best answer that I got from someone high up in the Obama administration, that he was trying to appease Republicans.
Right.
So
now I'm going to give my story also. I just say one question. So ask your question, and then I'm going to share my experience with the same thing that Eileen's talking about.
I don't have a question, but just a statement that under President Clinton, I can only speak this loud.
Go ahead, we'll broadcast it.
That under President Clinton, he also tried to put up a wall to not have all these immigrants come in illegally. So it was not only Obama, but it was under Clinton and Bush. All the presidents have tried to do this.
Right.
And it's something that really and truly should be done. I think these people should be able to come into the country, but legally. Legally.
I agree, and that's what I write in the policy paper, that I hope you take time to, I brought a copy, but I'm gonna give each one of you my card, send me an email and I'll send it to you. It's a holistic approach. Of course, the political answer is give the administration what it wants for border security. Then bring the 11 million out of the shadows in a path, just the legalization, not a path to citizenship, because Republicans rightly believe, and I do too, that we shouldn't reward people that broke the law or overstayed their visa to a direct path to citizenship. If the person has a way to become a legal permanent resident and a citizen through the existing laws, they can. And if you ask the people that are undocumented if they would be happy with that, they would love it. They tell me it's the Democrats that keep talking about this path to citizenship, which Republicans don't want because politically, again, they believe that the undocumented population will be Democratic voters, which I believe they're even wrong in that, because as Barry and I know, many of them are Catholic, evangelicals, and so
Being persecuted.
the solution would be what I'm saying, bring the 11 million out of the shadows. The dreamers should get a path to citizenship, but how do you prevent the future undocumented migration from this region? So I'm all in favor of temporary worker programs, expanding them, particularly from the Northern Triangle. That is something that President Trump has done, but of course the media doesn't talk about it. Right now, people from Guatemala can access these temporary worker programs without a cap. So that's something behind the scenes I'm also working to try to get the ambassador of the United States in Guatemala to advertise this more, because who is profiting from this undocumented migration? Transnational criminal organizations working with narcos, charging each person from Guatemala $10,000, telling them that if they bring a child, it's their ticket in. I have horrific stories of children here locally that are happening. We just had a story that came out in the Palm Beach Post, and I've been telling Representative Frankel about it. So there's a really, really dark underbelly to this migration. So that's holistically an approach.
What about Trump's supportive regimes in Honduras and those countries down there that are not very healthy and are terrorizing people?
I'm just here focusing on, his support and regime. So I'm here just addressing the fact that we have a movement of people.
Isn't that the heart of the issue? Isn't that why people are fleeing for their lives? And
Honduras is, I'm really
Because
also
they're-
speaking primarily of Guatemala. That's why I was honorary consul of Guatemala. I was given that honor. I focused a lot of my work. I don't know, I have so many people from Guatemala. We don't have that many Hondurans here. El Salvador, each country, you're right, it's a different reality. But all of the three countries, the key thing, and this is what I told Representative Deutsch and Representative Mast last year, I went to DC to try to get funding, is attending the root causes. So yes, I agree, we have to attend the root causes. And for me, it's the work I'm trying to do now with a nonprofit in Guatemala. It's providing children education, vocational training, and gainful employment, because I know that in 10 years from now, or 20, that will break this cycle. But yes, it goes to root causes.
Let me share my story and then you can ask
Can I
questions.
just make a statement?
Go right
There's
ahead.
not enough staff to bring these people up to legal status. The staff was cut recently in order to benefit the people who are looking to become citizens.
Well, I don't think there's a big urgency to try to create them,
That's what
to
I
make them
mean.
legal anyway. So I think that's why. It's not that they just cut the staff, it's that they're really interested in making them legal, so why not? Let me just share.
I don't know, I have to disagree. I'm practicing attorney, I don't see any changes like that. With cases that I'm filing, things are working just
She's
fine.
not talking about cases you're filing, she's talking upstairs.
staff.
Upstairs, they're cutting back staff out of like,
Oh,
at the national level.
I have to say that President Trump did cut some USAID aid,
Yeah, that's
rightly so. because guess what? As an immigration lawyer, I know too many things that perhaps people don't know. Some of USAID funding was being used by people in these villages to pay the smuggler to come here. I don't know how many I have count, and they have seen a lot of waste. So, you know what, if it's President Trump or it's President Buttigieg next time around, I will still think that we have to really look at the Northern Triangle, something that President Obama did not do his first 4 years. Actually, the deportations of President Obama was the worst foreign policy toward the region ever. That's why I created.
Why do you single out Obama? Trump hasn't been
With
a shining
President
star
Obama-
looking out for the triangle either. He's not supporting good regimes and reforms. He's supporting tyrants, thugs, dictators, and killers. Isn't he?
President Trump has given attention to the region, has sent his top people to the region.
Yeah, he's supporting it.
He is finding a regional solution. In my policy paper, I also deal with this. There is a need to address asylum in a regional fashion, right? So I am totally in for looking for asylum in Mexico, looking for asylum in a regional fashion. If not, mass flash migrations can devolve into a national security issue.
let me share-
So we have those issues.
All right, let me
to
share
face.
my story, then we'll take more questions and feedback, but I'll be pretty brief. Okay, so I formed the Environmental Coalition of Palm Beach County because the bad guys, the developers that want to pave over all of our farmland and encroach on the Everglades and support the sugar industry, which uses the Everglades as their personal sewer and then makes us clean it up. The bad guys are just giving money to everybody, and they have a lot of power. The environmentalists are just sponsoring canoe trips and doing these little things that are no match for them. So I thought, to stand up to these guys, you need to get a coalition, all the environmentalists together in one group and take action. Litigation, filing lawsuits, demonstrations, taking people out of office, saying who our enemies are, and pointing them out and getting people to vote against them. So I formed the Environmental Coalition. I did it actually in my first year in office, which really, really irked the politicians, especially the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party was outraged that I would use my legislative influence in office to organize environmentalists. You might think, well, they're for the environment, right? No, not really. They did not like what I was doing. The Democratic Party gets vast amounts of money from the developers. They're best buddies with the developers. And when you go up and down 441 and you see one development after another, and you think, oh, this is terrible, you got the Democratic Party and the Republican Party to blame. Can't really say which is worse. They're both horrible. But some of the money is coming from GL Homes, which is owned by some Israelis or something. It should stand for greedy landlords, because these guys are just rapacious in destroying our open space. And I had it out with, actually with Rabbi Warshaw. Rabbi Warshaw loved the greedy developers because they gave him a lot of money to construct the Jewish Federation, the building. The beautiful Jewish Center came a lot from developer money, and these developers gave a lot of money to Jewish representatives, county people, state people, and they put them in office, and so they were beholden to him. So the developers had a conduit to the reins of power, to the point that we even had we raised $150 million to try to protect the agricultural reserve, and instead of the county just voting no more development, they just took money from the taxpayers and then paid off the landowners and the farmers and the developers. Is horribly corrupt. And same thing with the sugar industry. The sugar industry gives money to Democratic clubs, and so that they can run a luncheon, and their president looks nice because he's got nice hats and nice food and stuff like that. They're taking money from the sugar industry, and then they're doing things to hurt the environment. So when I got into Tallahassee, I formed this coalition, and I voted according to what the Sierra Club and Audubon wanted, and I found out, I kind of knew, but I found out firsthand, that was not popular with the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is really interested in talking about protecting the environment. But when push comes to shove, if you have the environment or a campaign check from the developers, forget about it. And so I was arch enemy number one on their hit list. And I was told that I would never, ever serve another term. And I wasn't told that by Republicans. I was told that by Democrats. I didn't take free meals. They hated that. I sent out a newsletter telling the kids, you guys need to become politically active because you're all in portables and the education is substandard because they're putting in developments and there's no room for schools and you guys don't vote and you don't have money, so they don't care about you, so you need to rise up. They hated that. So there was just many, many things that they were saying. Campaign finance reform, weren't interested. I had a bill that was sponsored by, campaign finance reform groups. I'm not interested in that. I had Debbie Wasserman Schultz. There was a bill. She served with me in the state house. There was a bill about concurrency, meaning that you can't put up a development unless the infrastructure is all planned out. You got to have roads and sewers and traffic and schools. So I wanted to place on there something about schools. I wanted to say, because I didn't want kids in Portland, I wanted to say concurrency should also include schools. Well, she didn't like that, neither did the Democratic Party. And she was, I guess, assigned to try to keep me in line. And she told me, take your amendment off, because if you put it up there, we're going to be forced to vote. And we're going to be forced to vote for the developers and against overcrowded schools. It's going to make us look horrible if you do that. You got to get rid of your amendment. I said, I don't think so. I'm not getting rid of the amendment. And the rest is history. She became a rising star and a leading Democrat because she was really good at selling out to the highest bidder and pretending that she really cared. Okay, so I know what happened. I know where the bodies are buried. And in my coalition, it was very similar to what happened with Eileen. I formed the Environmental Coalition like Eileen. Eileen was extremely idealistic, passionate for justice. And there's people who have absolutely no respect for that at all. It doesn't mean a darn thing to them. What they care about is money and staying in office. To them, it's kind of silly, like people who care about ideals. Idealism is pretty much dead. Somebody who's an idealist, they think they're naive. Now, there are some politicians who might channel that if they think it's going to help them politically. And there's also some politicians who do respect idealism in different areas, especially if it's an area that they could relate to. But by and large, idealism and politics, they don't mix too well. So I formed a coalition, and then I had something very similar to what Eileen's talking about. I had these people who took my mailing list, our mailing list for the Environmental Coalition, and they contacted them all. There's also this Night Heron group, and they said, we're doing an anti-Israel demonstration. And I said, well, first of all, it's unjust, but also, what does that have to do with the environment? Why are you using our email list and co-opting our people for an anti-Israel thing? So they said, oh, well, Israel's doing things for the environment that's not good. So I had it out with them. And I said, okay, you guys think Israel's bad? Fine. Let's debate. I'll debate. You take your best spokesman, and I'll debate you right here, one-on-one, in front of the Environmental Coalition. You can televise it. Let's go. They said, oh, we're not into debating. I said, why not? If you're right, why don't you do it? We're not into that. They didn't have the guts to confront me. They just went and did all these nefarious things. And I remember vividly, at one of our coalition meetings, an organization that I founded, and I was there with one of the people who was one of the main protagonists, Anti-Israel. And she was talking with me, and I said, well, as Golda Meir said, and I was going to quote that there will be peace when the Arabs love their own children more than they hate our children. Right. So I said, as Golda Meir said, and she said, who's Golda Meir? And I said, you have no business talking about Israel. If you don't know Golda Meir, you're ignorant about Israel. You have no business speaking about it because all you're doing is spouting propaganda. You don't know who she is. You don't know the facts. So go study, and then you can talk about Israel. And at that pretty much did it. They were outraged, they were furious, and the coalition pretty much split up. Yeah. And there was a lot of fighting and arguing. So we formed the Palm Beach County Environmental Alliance, another group. It's very, very similar to what Eileen went through. The far left.
It was the same time. It was kind of 2009.
Oh, some of the same people. Yeah, some of the same.
So that's why we're saying, I am not surprised. Now, Linda Geller, who was going to come here, that is very involved in women's rights, She contacted me through the Women's March Coalition. She was so shocked about the anti-Semitism. I said, Linda, I've been dealing with this for 10 years. So has Barry. So yes, we dealt with it when it was kind of trying to come here.
When the Women's March movement started, before it even got off the ground, I was denouncing them. I
Yeah,
found out
that
who they
was 10
were.
years
And the Democratic Party they didn't want to denounce them because, oh, these are, they're part of our coalition or whatever.
Right,
These
part of
people were vile. They were really seriously anti-Semitic, Farrakhan-loving people. They were bad news. But in my coalition, it really was painful because I had people that I had worked with, activists that we
Same
worked
here.
with. We were on the front lines fighting the good fight for the environment, and their hatred of Israel superseded that. Now, let me just explain the mindset a little bit, because what I do, I talk to people. That's why I said, let's debate. I don't just run away and say, oh, these guys took over. I engage them in dialogue. I wanted to know, what are you thinking? Why do you think this about Israel? And I was able to get things out of them and many other people. So I can explain it to you very simply about why the left and liberals sometimes, not all, some of them tend to be anti-Israel. And it's very simple. To a left-wing radical type person, the United States is a big bad bully. We're doing a lot of bad stuff all over the world. We're intervening militarily where we don't belong and supporting regimes that are bad news. That assessment happens to be quite accurate, especially in the past. We supported a lot of horrible regimes and did a lot of terrible things. I know personally in Haiti, I went there and we supported the Duvaliers, who had Tonton Macoute people who were massacring. We did some horrible things, but the left-wing mind thinks, therefore, anyone who the United States is an ally with must be bad. It must be imperialistic. It must be colonial. It must be bad. U.S. is allies with Israel, therefore Israel bad. Also, Israel is more powerful. They look at Israel and the Palestinians, they forget, no, Israel's in a neighborhood of surrounding countries that want to destroy them. Israel is not the aggressor. They don't see it that. And there's also anti-Semitism in that movement. There's anti-Semitism in the left and in the right. The right wing has their people who are anti-Semitic, and the left wing has it too. But anti-Semitism always comes into play and influences, and it's hard to know exactly. I talk to people and they're anti-Israel. I'm trying to assess, are they anti-Semitic? Some of them have views about Jewish people that they don't recognize as anti-Semitic. They've imbibed it like a fish is in water in the ocean, doesn't realize it's wet. It's like they don't think it's anti-Semitic, it's just, they're just telling the facts about Jews to them. But they're anti-Semitic and they don't get it. So this problem is serious on the left. And the solution that I've been talking about for a long time about anti-Semitism is liberals and Democrats have to denounce it in their own party,
Yes.
with the Squad and with other people who are doing things against Israel. We have to denounce it in our party, and the Republicans have to denounce it in their party. Well, unfortunately, what happens is a lot of times the liberals will ignore anti-Semitism in their party and notice it very keenly, and the Republicans go after them. The Republicans ignore a whole bunch of horrible things and talk about the Democrats, and therefore what you have is there's no dialogue or no understanding, and you have Jewish people who are placing partisan politics above loyalty to Israel, to Judaism, and more importantly, to Jewish ideals. Their partisan politics trumps, if you'll pardon the expression, their Jewish idealism and their Jewish identity. And it's about time that Jewish people stood up. That's what I appreciate about Eileen. She cares about all these other people, and just as she cares about them, she cares about the Jewish people also. The Jewish people need to be protected, and we need to do that by placing our concern for Israel and Judaism above partisan politics. That's why I'm here, because I will denounce anti-Semitism in the Democratic Party, and I'm hoping that others will too, and I'm hoping they'll do it in the Republican Party. Right now, that is not happening.
Thank you, and I'm also here giving up my time for that. It's not, and I'm really thankful to you, Barry, because it was very lonely back then. And I have to tell you, when that group decided to do that event of BDS, this young Costa Rican kid, 28, involved with Answer Coalition, please Google Answer Coalition. I called him up and I said, blah, blah, blah. Emmanuel, I'll say his name. Can you tell me if you believe in a two-state solution? Because I was shocked. I mean, I'm not an expert on anything. I'm like, do you believe in a two-state solution? Silence. So do you believe in a two-state solution? Because they were going to do an event with, he was silent. I said, do you believe that Israel should exist as a Jewish state? And he said, no. So I said, what do you think we should do with all the Jews left that live in Israel? There was silence.
Put them in the sea.
There was silence. And then he said to me, they should go to the United States. So that's when I remember calling you, calling Luis Fleischman. I brought my husband. They told me, don't go to the Night Herald. So it was a very, very difficult time, because that's when I started knowing more about the BDS movement. And you have to be really proud of your rabbi, because we haven't even talked of other things we did. We would show up to the Night Herald.
Yeah,
we would find out whenever they were going to have a BDS movement
in the
thing.
face.
And he showed up here, Luis Fleischman, who was more Republican. And I brought someone else from the American Jewish Committee. And she came all, and we stood there and we watched it. Once they were discussing water rights, and we were there. And guess what? When my friend Luis, who's an expert on anti-Semitism in Israel, said, and he lived in Israel, I want to talk about water rights. No, you can't talk. Remember, they kicked us out of the coalition. They literally kicked us out. That's what the left is. They don't let you talk. They don't let you express the hate against our people.
Well, I'll modify that somewhat. It's not the left.
The extreme left.
There are some people on the left and some people on the right who are totally intolerant of a different view.
Right.
And those folks there, they were bad news. What was painful is that, like I said, there were a lot of people that I was very friendly with, and I had to go to that meeting and stand up and oppose them. And I had many people refuse to talk to me, send me hate mail, and also, we have to understand is, I was totally trashed in progressive circles, as Eileen was. So I work with environmentalists, I work with women's rights people, I work with gun control people. I was trashed by these people, so that I was not able anymore to organize like I used to, because I stood up for Israel. And let me explain something else. There are people who love black people if they know their place. But if black people stand up for black rights, then they don't want anything to do with it. Then they're bad. There are people who love women unless they stand up for women's rights. Then all of a sudden, they're not so thrilled about women anymore. They like women if they're in their place. The same is true with Jewish people. If you're Jewish, they'll love you. In fact, they'll really love you if you're Jewish and you go against Israel, because they can use you to score propaganda points. They love Jewish people.
Yes.
Who don't like Israel. But a Jewish person who stands up for Israel and stands up against anti-Semitism, they don't love them anymore, and they will be vilified and they'll be run out of town.
And we both experienced that. Actually, there was a young anarchist that I'm not going to name her. Actually, she was the only one that we told her, would you want to have a meeting with Barry, Louise, remember? And we brought like these people from our Jewish community, and let's speak. And we gave her all this information, and she took the time. But I'm just proud that we spoke out, and I think that we made our impact here in the county. We did suffer because has been painful, like Barry said. People that we knew just gave us their back. They call me, they probably say I'm a right-winger, where all my actions and my work, I'm not. But I am going to, like I said, fight for civil rights and human rights of all. But of course, I never thought that I would be doing this. I never thought that I would be fighting anti-Semitism in the United States now. But I have. The last 10 years, you can ask my husband and Barry. I've been fighting. I've been telling people I'm fighting for immigrants' rights and anti-Semitism at the same time. And people didn't understand me until the Women's March. That's when more of my friends that experienced what I experienced, and that's when my friend Linda Geller, that's when the Zionist movement was created, that if you guys are on Facebook, you should join, because it's more of a left-wing group that is progressive, but we're not going to be silent about the hate against Israel. And so I urge anybody, my decision has been that I've decided to become an independent. And I'm not telling people who to vote for anymore. I'm just saying I'm not going to be part of a party that coddles anti-Semites. And I'm really upset at Representative Frankel because she has been asked to speak to us about what's going on with that, the group of Ilan Omar, that she's in the forums. I know that the Federation has requested meetings with her, and she doesn't want to meet with us. So I think we should pressure Representative Frankel and Representative Deutsch to speak out against that hate. That's how I feel. But I'm going to continue doing this, and luckily I have to say, if I didn't have Rabbi Silver back then, it would have been a very tough battle. I don't even know if I could, but it has been very lonely.
Yeah, we stood
We're still here. Luckily, we spoke out, and regretfully, what I see now, what we saw simmering 10 years ago, because it was simmering, at least in Palm Beach County, we spoke up. But it regretfully did penetrate the Democratic Party, and we could not deny it. And look at today's news. Tell me if this is not, we had a principle in the Democratic Palm Beach County, Democratic School District, denying the Holocaust, and still in today's news. And I posted on Facebook, and guess what? I got 2 likes. And I know a lot of my Jewish friends that are Democrats, that are silent. And they don't like me right now. But I post it. And that's what I think. We should speak out, because regretfully, if we don't speak out, it has already penetrated the Democratic Party.
Well, let me just add one more coda to this, and then if there's any other comments or questions. As I mentioned in the beginning, I invite people here that I agree with and I don't agree with. Normally what happens is almost every time whoever we invite in, I agree with on certain things and I disagree with on other things. So with Eileen, I agree with her on many, many things. And what transcends all of that, I have great respect for people who fight in the trenches against overwhelming odds to protect the people that really need a hand. It's thankless work. It's really tough. You got judges and administrative law judges who are totally against you. It's hard to explain what it's like to go and imagine if there's somebody that who's really argumentative and you can never get them to see your way of thinking. These people. Well, you have people like that who wear a robe. You have people like that who you can't get through to these people, and you just spend hundreds of hours filing cases for free, hoping that maybe something will happen and maybe some upper judge will, knowing that it probably won't, and knowing that even if it doesn't happen, you got to do it, because you can't just give up and not have them happen. I've filed countless cases also for the environment, knowing that the odds are totally stacked against me. I don't do immigration, so I don't know about that field. All I know is this: I know what it's like to go to court knowing the odds are against you, knowing your clients have no money, knowing that you're probably going to lose, and just be willing to fight. There's very, very, very few people who do that, and we need to respect people who do it, not shut them down, especially the politicians. I will say, though, that as from my perspective, the Democratic Party has let me down significantly in many ways, as I've explained. However, the Republican Party, as bad as the Democratic Party is, in my opinion, is
a lot worse.
I don't know if I would say 100 times or 1,000 times, but it's one of those numbers worse. Okay, especially supporting regimes based on who can make Trump rich and who's going to treat him with a red carpet. If you fawn over him, you could kill a Jewish kid named Otto Warmbier in North Korea and lie about it. And if you say nice things about Trump, all of a sudden this guy, he's an angel. You could assassinate a journalist, and Trump says, well, I've made millions of dollars off the Saudis, So I love the Saudis. No, our whole foreign policy is based on who can make the most money for Trump or fawn over him, which is absolutely disgusting. And there's regimes there in Latin America that are being supported by him for that reason, that are creating refugees. Also, the biggest refugee problem that we're going to have is really, really scary. It's going to be climate refugees. Climate refugees from areas where the sea is going to rise up, and people who are living along the coast are going to become refugees. That will be a nightmarish scenario.
So is Sanders a solution then?
And it was that?
Sanders is a solution, because he
Sanders
seems to
has
be
a
the one.
solution?
Sanders has, well, the solution is to get rid of anybody
Does
who's a
Trump.
climate denier and replace them with anybody else. I would put my dog in place, but yes, Sanders has a better solution than Trump because at least he acknowledges the problem. How he's going to fix it, I don't really care. I just want somebody who's a climate denier out of there and put somebody else in who actually understands science and understands refugees. Now, if you think that this is just coming from me, Bibi Netanyahu, has stated that climate change is as great or greater an existential threat as the Arabs to Israel. Yes, because the Arabs say we're going to drive we're going to drive the Jews into the sea. Climate change threatens to drive the sea right over Israel. They're envisioning Tel Aviv disappearing and more refugees being created all over the place. So this is a serious problem. I'm not here to get involved in a Trump discussion. But if somebody's going to put all the blame on the Democrats, and I do blame the Democrats, then in order to have some type of overall view, you got to put it in perspective. So I do that. I believe, again, Democrats have to challenge what's wrong in their party, and Republicans have to do that too. Right now, that's not happening. We're all in our trenches. We're all just bashing the other party, and I refuse to go along with that. And yes, many, many, many Democrats have nothing to do with me, because I am relentless in also challenging the Democratic Party. And I think we all need to do that. I think we need to place our American ideals and Jewish ideals above all else. And then we're in a serious, serious problem right now. And also, anti-Semitism in the United States is very, very dangerous. One thing we're learning now is, which I think everybody in this room knows, we're not immune in the United States.
No.
It could happen here. It is happening here. It's starting here,
It
and
has
we need to
happened.
be
It
serious.
started 10 years ago.
It's on the
For me,
rise.
I came here thanks to the invitation.
Well, it happened.
Right.
It happened under Roosevelt when the Jews weren't allowed in and they were turned back. This is not new.
I'll be right
It's
back.
been going on for a long time. Is there anyone else who wants to make any concluding comments? Yes.
The only thing I wanted to say is this: I appreciate what you're saying about the fighting about this, all these things, and pointing them out. However, you always come down to the final aspect of it. If what you do makes it easier for the other party to win, you've accomplished absolutely nothing. Sometimes you have to compromise your principles that you believe in for the simple reason that you want to get the worst guys out of there. And as you know, when you're dealing with politics, as you well know, I'm sure you well know, there's nothing that takes the place of winning.
Let me share. Okay, let me respond to that because I appreciate that comment. The reason why Democrats are not winning is because they've done exactly what you suggested. That's why they're not winning. Democrats are trying to become Republican light. When I got to Tallahassee, they gave me a list of lobbyists, and they said, call all these people and tell them what they want to hear because we need their money. The Democrats, what I'm suggesting is the Democrats are also doing things that are against the environment. In the last election, the environmentalists wouldn't line up behind the Democratic Party because most people don't know what's going on. They do. The environmentalists know what's going on. And they were saying to me, both parties are the same. And I said, you're crazy. They're not the same. Yes, the Democrats are not doing good things. The Democrats talk about protecting the environment. They don't do it so well. The Republicans actually actively mock environmentalists and go after the environment to exploit it. There's a radical difference, but they did not mobilize, and if they had, we would have won. On health care, instead of having universal health care, Obama came up with this crazy plan that everybody's required to have insurance, which rewards the insurance company. So activists in that area were fed up and discouraged. Like Eileen said, immigration rights activists looked to the Democratic Party for relief. They didn't get it. What would happen, just imagine, if the Democratic Party actually did what its ideals were? What if they were fighting for immigrants, fighting for the planet, fighting to protect us from gun violence? We would win easily. The reason why we're not winning is because they've compromised themselves so much. They don't stand for very much at all, and the people don't line up to vote. And turnout is everything. People are not going to get out and get their friends out because they see a party that's compromised, and it's on both sides. And so I believe that to win as Democrats, we got to live up to democratic ideals, not compromise.
Well, thanks a lot. Your question, thank you for the invitation, but I really didn't come here to advocate for one party or other. My goal always is the 11 million that both parties play with. The reason why President Obama probably didn't fulfill his promise is because of the lobbyists of the private correctional industry that has given much money to Democrats and Republicans. So that's why I failed to tell you that. So I'm really just here because I will continue to fight for the sojourners among us, whoever wins next election, because I don't believe that Democrats will do what they promise or that Republicans will do what they're promised. So I just came here to tell you my experience in the immigrants' rights movement with anti-Semitism and what I did. And I urge you all as Jews, I feel that if you're a Democrat, I'm not here to convince you not to. Like I said, I'm no longer a Democrat, I'm an independent, and I love that. But if you are, and we have seen the rise of anti-Semitism, contact Representative Frankel. Ask her to speak to the Federation. Ask her to stand up about the representatives that are virulently anti-Semitic. It's obvious before they take over the entire party. You know, take the time to contact Representative Deutsch and Frankel and say, where are you standing on this? You know, so that's the only message I'm here to give you, that continue to do what you can as a citizen. I don't believe that a party or whoever wins is going to save us. I'm totally a believer on citizen actions and engaged citizens. So I'm just here telling you that right now I'm working a lot on this initiative to help reintegrate children that will be returned. Even if we have a Democratic administration, we're always going to be returning minors, and this is a way to attend the root causes. So if you're interested in this work that I'm doing, you know.
I mean, what do you think about Trump, the way he talks about Mexicans and stuff like
Yeah,
that? What's your
I've
thought
been,
about that?
it's been, like I said, it's very painful when he was talking like that. You know, I didn't vote for him that time around, but I judge politicians by their actions rather than by their words. So President Obama was wonderful how he spoke about immigrants, but the carnage that we have on the ground and the 400,000 families that we have separated is what speaks loud and clear to me. So I judge politicians and people more by their actions than by their words.
But you know the power of words. You know that, for instance, with anti-Semitism, before there were anti-Semitic acts against Jews, they were always preceded by words.
So we should confront the Democrats that are anti-Semites on that as well.
Right, but
So
I'm just wondering why is it
Representative-
that you keep saying that we should confront the Democrats about it? Why have you not ever said we should confront Trump
We
about
have
what he's
to,
saying about
yes,
Mexico?
you have to confront Trump too.
Okay,
I
okay.
know I have in Facebook and
Okay.
social media when he was doing that. But again, I'm just saying that I don't get fooled by sweet-talking politicians anymore. I fell for President Obama the first time, but like I said, I lived the carnage of the 3 million deportations, that did it to me.
Right.
That
Yes.
really did it to
Jane.
me.
I worked in legislative planning up in New York, and I had a cartoon, or maybe this is the end of the whole night. It said, "My son is running for office. I'll never believe a word he says again."
I think that's a good way to conclude. So, do you want more comment?
I have one more comment.
And then we'll
And this
conclude.
is nothing to do with what we're talking about now. It's to go back to the immigration situation. We've always heard this business of 11 million undocumented immigrants. okay? As a forensic accountant, I want to know if there's where in the world does this $11 million, or rather 11 million people figure come from? People are undocumented, are exactly that, undocumented.
Right, so
They're
how
not
they
counted,
counted.
they're
They
not
counted
there.
maybe
Nobody
because
really
of
knows.
the children that are in school. I mean, we don't know, but that's why I've argued to both parties that it's in our national interest to bring the undocumented population out of the shadows. We should know how many are here. We should legalize them. We shouldn't give them the path to citizenship because that's never going to happen politically. But we don't know. That's the figure that's been thrown there that I believe they get because of maybe they compute through the children
I
that
doubt
are
if they
in
computed
school
it
or-
at all, as a matter of fact.
Actually,
I think somebody made it up.
I actually think
And
there's
it's
less
been
than
spewed out
11
over and
million.
over again.
Until they
I think it's been
believe it.
spewed out over and over again to frighten people because of the numbers.
No.
Frankly, and I don't think it exists at all. I don't think there's anybody who's computed it because nobody's ever documented it any way whatsoever that I've ever read. I cannot find any kind of reference to where the idea of 11 million people comes from. It's absolutely
But we
out
do
there and it
have a
doesn't mean a
confirmation
thing.
that 3 million people were deported under President Obama. So maybe it's not 11 million anymore, maybe it's 8 million. But remember, we've had border crises and we've had more people come in. So the only way we will know that very important policy question, because it's important to know who's here for our national security, is for Congress, hopefully after the election, whoever wins, I will keep bothering my Congress people, telling them that the way out is through compromise. That is the only way out, and that's when we will know. When Congress decides to work together and say, okay, I'll give you border secure, I'll give you border, you bring the 11 or the people here out of the shadows, you know, that's when we will have real good policy. But regretfully, I think both parties, like I said, like to use immigration as a wedge issue. And it works. But regretfully, immigration as a wedge issue works more in favor of Republicans, particularly now that the Democratic base has pushed the Democratic Party so far to the left.
Now, let me offer my concluding comments. I think that there is anti-Semitism and BDS support in the Democratic Party, and the Democrats need to denounce it. You know what BDS stands for, right? Bullying, discrimination, and scapegoating. It should be denounced.
Well, now tell them what it really stands for.
Well, they know.
They know.
Boycott, divest, and sanction. They know. But this should be denounced. It's a huge double standard, and we should have no part of it. I heard an interview with Bernie Sanders. They asked him, where do you get your concern for the poor and social justice from? And I was shocked and saddened when he said, I don't know, it's just something that's a part of me. And I'm thinking, if he ever got to be a Jewish president, he'd be the first Jewish president who's not Jewish. You mean you don't know? You don't know that the Torah says millions of times, help the poor? You don't know that it's a basic principle of Judaism to help others and to give to charity? You don't know that?
It's all
You
part of
mean
him.
somebody hands you a softball, like, where did you get this concern for social justice? And you have a chance to champion Jewish values and to say, I got it from my Jewish heritage, and you're silent? Either he's abysmally ignorant, or he doesn't want to stand out as Jewish and make it known that he's Jewish, and doesn't want to invite people to say, oh, he's Jewish. He's the first Jewish candidate that's not really Jewish. This is shameful.
He doesn't want
This is shameful.
And those scary
And
young
I-
women are in him.
And I think we
Yes.
should speak up about it. Now, let me
Linda
tell you.
Sarsour, who actually President Obama gave her, I don't know if you know, he gave her the platform. This is what, Linda Sarsour, who's working for the Sanders campaign, who was involved in the Women's March.
Now, let me finish
President
my...
Obama in 2010 gave her an award for courage. So I'm letting you know, this has been simmering. This has been, while we have fallen asleep, we have been giving these people platforms and we have allowed it to happen.
Let me finish my conclusion. Because I notice Eileen, her comments are always directed towards the Democrats. They did this, they did this, they did this, they did this. And Trump, well, it's just words, who cares? I care. I care about words. I care about someone who denounces people who come from Mexico and from other countries. It's disgusting, and it fuels Semitism, it fuels racism. It's disgusting. And for a political party and people to say nothing about it is disgraceful. I also care deeply when I hear the president go in front of a Jewish audience and say, oh, you guys just care about my money. You guys are all interested in your money, and I'm doing great for you because you care about money. And you're ruthless killers, he said to the Jewish audience. He says, I know you guys, you're ruthless killers because I've worked with you as a landlord. I find that disgusting. And I find it more disgusting, not that he says it, I expect nothing from him but trash. I find it more disgusting that an entire Jewish group was right there. He was talking to them, and not one of them said anything. They all laughed. They're all laughing. They're all going along while he's issuing anti-Semitic tropes. A Jewish audience is laughing. And a Jewish population now, large numbers of Jewish people, are supporting a guy who goes against every Jewish ideal there is. And as far as liberals and Democrats and stuff like that, we all have to stand up for decency. And we're not doing that. We need to do a better job of standing up for decency because that's a Jewish ideal. So let's call a spade on both parties, and let's denounce this type of thing wherever we hear it. We're going to have Rockin' Shabbat this Friday. We'll be celebrating Tu B'Shvat. My family's coming to town. Arnie's going to be here doing some really cool music, some environmental stuff. We'll be honoring my mom. If you're not on our email list, get on the email list. And I will finish with this. My yarmulke is off to Eileen. In my eyes, she's a superstar, doing some incredible work for the immigrant community, speaking what needs to be spoken. I don't agree with everything she says, but I agree with this. She's passionate for justice and for the Jewish people and for immigrants and for Israel. And for that, she has my undying respect. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.